You may suppose that you came upon these words by accident, perhaps by habit, perhaps by idle curiosity, perhaps because there was nothing else pressing at the moment. That is the usual explanation we give ourselves when something uncomfortable yet important begins to knock at the door of our attention. But I would suggest another possibility. It may be that you are here because you were meant to be, not in the grand, theatrical sense we reserve for heroes in stories, but in the far more serious sense, where ordinary people are quietly summoned to make an eternal decision while believing nothing much is happening at all. God does not often shout, he whispers. And the most dangerous moment in a person's life is not when God thunders from the heavens, but when he gently asks for something very small, 30 minutes, and waits to see whether we will give it. You are not chosen because you are better than others. That notion has ruined more souls than it has ever helped. You were chosen because choice itself has been placed before you. And every choice, however small it appears, bends the soul either toward God or away from him. The question then is not whether this message is for you. It plainly is. The question is whether you will treat these next 30 minutes as a trivial interruption, or as the moment you later realize you were being invited to become someone new. Being chosen is not privilege, it is responsibility. This idea runs against nearly every instinct we carry. We are trained to believe that being chosen means being elevated, singled out for comfort, exempted from difficulty, placed above others in some invisible hierarchy. Yet history, conscience, and faith all argue the opposite. To be chosen is not to be spared, it is to be summoned. It is not a crown placed on the head, but a weight placed on the shoulders. The moment a person begins to believe that being chosen makes them special, safe, or superior, they have already misunderstood the call. In most lives, responsibility arrives quietly. It does not announce itself with drama or spectacle. It often appears disguised as inconvenience, interruption, or an inner unease that refuses to go away. When someone is chosen, they are not handed applause, they are handed awareness. Awareness of truth, of moral obligation, of a higher standard that now applies whether they like it or not. Once you see something clearly, you are no longer innocent in the same way. You cannot unsee it. You cannot return to comfortable ignorance without paying a cost inside yourself. The idea of being chosen has ruined many people precisely because they interpreted it as favoritism. They imagined God as a kind of cosmic admirer, pleased with them in contrast to others. But God does not choose people to admire them. He chooses them to use them, refine them, stretch them, and often to place them exactly where they would not choose to be themselves. Scripture, literature, and lived experience agree on this point. Those who are called are usually reluctant, uncertain, and painfully aware of their inadequacy. Responsibility begins the moment a person realizes that their life is no longer solely about their own comfort, preferences, or timing. When you are chosen, your time stops belonging entirely to you. Your thoughts stop being harmless private property. Your habits are no longer neutral. Everything becomes material. Every word, every silence, every delay now carries weight because influence has entered the picture. Whether you asked for it or not, your life now points somewhere, and others may follow without ever telling you they are watching. This responsibility is not glamorous. More often than not, it is lonely. Being chosen frequently separates a person inwardly before it ever separates them outwardly. You begin to feel out of step with casual cruelty, trivial pursuits, and shallow satisfactions that once seemed sufficient. What used to entertain you now leaves a bitter aftertaste. What once felt optional begins to feel necessary. This is not because you have become better than others, but because you have become more accountable than you were before. There is also a peculiar danger that comes with being chosen, the temptation to delay obedience while celebrating the calling. Many people enjoy the idea that they are chosen far more than they enjoy the demands that follow. They speak endlessly about purpose while avoiding discipline. They wait for clarity while ignoring the instructions they already have. Responsibility does not begin when everything is explained. It begins when enough has been revealed to require action. To be chosen means that excuses lose their power. You may still use them, but they no longer convince you. Circumstances, fatigue, fear, and past wounds can explain behavior, but they no longer justify stagnation. The inner voice that once whispered can become insistent, not cruelly, but persistently. It reminds you that you know better now. And knowing better is a burden as much as it is a gift. Responsibility also reshapes how failure feels. When you stumble, it is not merely personal disappointment, it is a breach of trust. Not a theatrical condemnation, but a quiet grief. You sense that something was entrusted to you and mishandled. This awareness can either harden a person into defensiveness or soften them into humility. The chosen are not those who never fail. They are those who learn to respond rightly to failure without pretending it does not matter. Another uncomfortable truth is that responsibility does not ask whether you feel ready. Readiness is often a luxury reserved for those who will never move. Those who are chosen are frequently unprepared by their own assessment. yet compelled by something deeper than confidence. Responsibility grows you into the role. The role rarely waits for you to grow comfortable first. This is why courage among the chosen is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act while fear remains. Being chosen also places limits on neutrality. You cannot endlessly remain undecided, detached, or ironic. At some point, not choosing becomes a choice in itself. Silence becomes speech, delay becomes refusal. Responsibility presses you toward alignment, toward coherence between what you claim to believe and how you actually live. The gap between those two things becomes increasingly uncomfortable, like a shoe that no longer fits. There is a hidden mercy in this burden. Responsibility, though heavy, gives life direction. It rescues a person from drifting aimlessly between distractions. It organizes priorities, clarifies values, and sharpens the sense of what truly matters. While privilege asks, "What do I get?" responsibility asks, "What is required of me now?" That question, though demanding, gives meaning to ordinary moments and dignity to small acts that would otherwise seem insignificant. The chosen are often tempted to look for dramatic assignments while neglecting immediate duties. Yet responsibility almost always begins close to home, in unremarkable faithfulness, in attention to God that no one applauds. 30 minutes given sincerely may matter more than years of vague intention. Responsibility is proven not by decorations but by consistency, not by intensity but by endurance. And perhaps the most sobering aspect of being chosen is that it does not guarantee success as the world defines it. It guarantees only faithfulness as the measure. Outcomes are not fully in your control, but obedience is. Responsibility asks you to act rightly even when results are uncertain, even when gratitude is absent, even when the work seems unseen. It calls you to care about truth more than recognition, integrity more than approval, alignment more than comfort. To realize that you are chosen is to realize that your life is being addressed. Something has spoken your name into the noise, not to flatter you, but to enlist you. The weight you feel is not accidental, it is proportional to what has been entrusted. And the quiet insistence you sense is not pressure from outside, but an inner acknowledgement that once responsibility has been given, it cannot simply be set down again without something in the soul beginning to protest, to ache, to wait for the moment when attention finally turns where it knows it must turn next. God often asks for little to reveal whether he can trust us with more. This is one of the quiet paradoxes of the spiritual life, and it is precisely why so many people miss what is happening when God speaks. We expect grand instructions, dramatic sacrifices, clear roadmaps. Instead, we are given something small, almost unimpressive, something that feels beneath the scale of our hopes and problems. A short span of time, a simple act of obedience, a moment of attention, and because it seems small, we are tempted to treat it as optional. Yet the smallness is the test. Trust is never proven in extremes first. No one hands great responsibility to a person who has not demonstrated faithfulness in minor matters. Not because the giver is cruel, but because trust is built through consistency, not intensity. God's requests often appear minimal not because they are unimportant, but because they reveal what governs us when nothing dramatic is at stake. 30 minutes does not threaten our identity, our finances, or our public reputation. What it threatens is our illusion of control over our time. Time is the first territory God asks for because it exposes the true hierarchy of our loves. We may speak eloquently about faith, destiny, and purpose, but the allocation of time tells a far more honest story. What we give time to shapes us, trains our attention, and slowly becomes our master. When God asks for a small portion of time, he is not negotiating a schedule. He is asking a question. Who comes first when no one is watching and nothing is forcing your hand? Small requests also strip away the excuse of inability. We can claim we are not ready for great tasks, that we lack resources, strength, knowledge, or opportunity. But very little is required to be present, to listen, to turn one's attention toward God for a short while. The simplicity of the request removes all plausible deniability. If we refuse, it is not because we cannot, but because we will not. That realization is uncomfortable, which is why we often distract ourselves before it fully settles. There is also something deeply revealing about how we respond to small obedience when life feels overwhelming. Many people believe they must first fix their circumstances before they can give attention to God. They imagine that prayer and presence are luxuries reserved for calmer seasons. Yet God's pattern is often the reverse. He asks for a little faithfulness in the middle of chaos to see whether we trust him enough to stop striving even briefly. The small request becomes a doorway, not an escape. When God asks for little, he is not minimizing the importance of what follows, he is calibrating the heart. A heart that resists small obedience will inevitably distort larger responsibility. Power, influence, clarity, and blessing amplify what already exists within a person. If impatience, distraction, and self-centeredness govern the small moments, they will dominate the larger ones as well. God withholds greater trust not as punishment, but as protection. Another reason God asks for little is that small acts reveal motivation. Large sacrifices can be fueled by pride, fear, or the desire for recognition. Small acts rarely are. No one applauds a quiet half-hour given sincerely. No audience forms around unseen faithfulness. The ego gains nothing from it. What remains is intent. Will you show up when there is no immediate reward, no emotional surge, no external pressure to perform? Small obedience also confronts the myth that transformation requires dramatic effort. We are conditioned to believe that change must be painful, extreme, or exhausting. Yet real change often begins with sustained attention over time. A small daily act repeated reshapes identity more effectively than occasional bursts of intensity. God's request for little is an invitation into rhythm, not spectacle. Rhythm builds capacity. Capacity invites trust. There is a hidden humility in being asked for little. It reminds us that we are not as indispensable as we might imagine. God does not need our grand gestures to accomplish his purposes. He invites us to participate, but on his terms. The small request humbles our sense of importance while dignifying our presence. You matter enough to be invited, but not so much that the universe depends on your performance. Refusing small obedience often sounds reasonable in our own minds. We tell ourselves we will comply later when we feel more spiritual, less tired, more focused, or less burdened, but later becomes a moving target. The habit of delay trains the soul to negotiate rather than respond. Over time, this negotiation dulls sensitivity. The voice does not necessarily disappear, but it grows easier to ignore. What was once a gentle request becomes background noise. When God asks for little, he is also teaching us how trust grows. Trust is reciprocal. We want God to entrust us with clarity, peace, direction, and strength, but trust flows both ways. By responding to small requests, we demonstrate that we can be trusted with more awareness, more insight, more responsibility. Not because God is uncertain, but because we are being formed into people capable of carrying what we ask for. Small obedience reshapes our relationship with control. Giving God a little time feels insignificant until we notice how fiercely we guard it. That resistance reveals how much of our anxiety is tied to constant management of our own lives. The act of stopping, even briefly, challenges the belief that everything will fall apart if we are not actively managing it. In that pause, trust is exercised not as an abstract belief, but as a lived decision. God's economy is different from ours. We measure investment by scale and immediate return. God measures faithfulness by willingness and consistency. The little we give is never little in effect. It is small only in appearance. In reality, it is a signal that we are listening, a signal that we are available, a signal that we are willing to be interrupted. And interruption is often where transformation begins. The danger is not that God asks too much, but that he asks so little we dismiss it. We underestimate the spiritual significance of simple obedience and overestimate our readiness for greater things. The small request is the gateway. It is the place where trust is tested without force, where love is demonstrated without drama, where freedom begins not through escape but through attention. Time given to God shapes the soul more than intentions ever do. Intentions are comforting because they allow us to feel aligned without being changed. They give us the emotional relief of agreement without the inconvenience of obedience. A person can intend for years and never be formed by those intentions because formation does not occur in the abstract. It occurs where attention repeatedly rests. What we dwell with shapes us, not what we admire from a distance. There is something deceptively noble about intention. It speaks the language of desire, of future goodness, of what we hope to become. But the soul is not shaped by hope alone. It is shaped by habit, by rhythm, by where the mind returns when it is not being supervised. Time reveals what intention conceals. Anyone can intend to pray, to trust, to change, to grow. Far fewer are willing to sit still long enough for those intentions to rearrange their inner life. The soul responds to presence, not promises. When time is given, something begins to happen beneath the surface. Often unnoticed at first, restlessness rises, discomfort appears. Thoughts scatter. These are not signs of failure, they are signs of exposure. Intention bypasses this stage entirely. Time does not. Time forces encounter. It brings the unexamined to the surface and removes the illusion that we are already who we think we are. Intention allows us to stay in control. Time requires surrender. To give time to God is to relinquish the right to constant stimulation, constant productivity, constant escape. It is to accept that something important may happen without our managing it. This is why time feels costly. It cannot be rehearsed or postponed without consequence. Once spent, it is gone, and the soul knows this. That knowledge gives time its power. There is also a deep honesty in time that intention lacks. You can intend privately and never be contradicted. Time, however, contradicts us constantly. It shows us how quickly we become bored with God, how easily we drift, how resistant we are to silence. These discoveries are humbling, but they are also necessary. A soul cannot be shaped by truths it refuses to face. Time places us gently but firmly in front of ourselves. The modern mind is trained to value efficiency, not presence. We want results quickly and visibly. Time with God often offers neither at first. It feels unproductive, even wasteful, to a culture obsessed with measurable outcomes. Yet the most important transformations are rarely measurable in the moment. They are cumulative. They occur the way erosion shapes stone, the way roots shape soil, the way light shapes what grows toward it. Intentions flatter our sense of self. They allow us to believe we are already aligned with the good. Time challenges that belief. It shows us the gap between what we claim to value and what actually commands our attention. This gap is not meant to shame us, but to instruct us. Awareness is the first movement of change. Without time, awareness remains shallow. With time, it deepens into recognition, and recognition into repentance, and repentance into renewal. Giving time to God is not primarily about information. Most people already know far more than they live. The problem is not lack of knowledge, but lack of integration. Time allows truth to move from the intellect into the body, into the nervous system, into instinct. Over time, responses change. Reactions soften. The soul becomes less hurried, less defensive, less fragmented. None of this happens through intention alone. Time also trains trust. At first, giving time feels like loss. We worry about what we could be doing instead, what might go undone, what opportunities we might miss. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifts. We begin to experience that the world does not collapse when we stop striving. Responsibilities wait, crises pause. This lived experience teaches trust more effectively than any argument ever could. There is a quiet reordering that happens when time is consistently given. Values move from theory into practice. What once felt urgent loses its grip. What once felt distant becomes near. God stops being an idea to think about and becomes a presence to respond to. This shift does not announce itself. It simply begins to influence decisions, tone, patience, and restraint in ways that surprise even the person being shaped. Intentions often focus on outcomes. Time focuses on relationship. A relationship cannot be rushed without being damaged. It requires shared presence, listening, mutual attention. The soul learns this through time, not through planning. You cannot intend your way into intimacy. You must remain long enough for trust to grow, for defenses to lower, for honesty to emerge. Another reason time is formative is that it exposes our attachments. When we slow down, the things we use to avoid ourselves lose their effectiveness. Distraction, entertainment, productivity, even religious activity can function as avoidance. Time strips these away. What remains can feel uncomfortable, but it is also where healing begins. The soul cannot be healed while it is constantly fleeing. Over time, something subtle happens to desire itself. What once felt forced begins to feel natural. What once required discipline begins to invite longing. This is not because the effort has disappeared, but because the soul has been trained to recognize where life flows. Intentions try to convince desire. Time educates it. The greatest resistance to giving time is often fear. Fear of silence. Fear of inadequacy. Fear of what might be revealed if we stop performing. Time with God confronts these fears not by arguing with them, but by outlasting them. When nothing catastrophic happens, when presence does not destroy us, fear loses credibility. The soul learns through experience what it could never learn through resolve alone. Time also humbles ambition. Many people want to be used greatly without being formed deeply. Time reverses this order. It insists on formation before function. It slows the impulse to rush ahead of character. This can feel frustrating, especially for those eager to make an impact. Yet unformed impact often wounds both the giver and the receiver. Time is a safeguard disguised as delay. Perhaps the most difficult truth is that intentions often serve our self-image, while time serves our transformation. Intention allows us to remain largely the same while feeling aligned with change. Time does not permit this. It presses gently but persistently toward coherence. Over weeks and months, patterns emerge. The soul becomes more integrated, less divided, less reactive. Not because effort has increased, but because attention has been consistently placed where it can do its quiet work. Time given to God is rarely dramatic. It does not guarantee emotional highs or immediate clarity. What it guarantees is exposure, formation, and alignment over time. The kind of alignment that holds under pressure, that remains when motivation fades, that shapes not just what we believe, but who we are becoming in the spaces no one else sees, in the pauses between actions, in the unguarded moments where the soul reveals what it has truly learned to love. Every small choice quietly moves us toward eternity, or away from it. We tend to imagine eternity as something distant, disconnected from ordinary moments, reserved for grand moral decisions or dramatic turning points. But the truth is far more unsettling. Eternity is not approached in leaps, it is approached in steps so small they barely register. The direction of a soul is set less by rare heroic acts and more by the accumulation of unnoticed decisions made when no one is watching and nothing seems to be at stake. Small choices feel harmless because they appear reversible. We tell ourselves that what we do today can be undone tomorrow, that one compromise does not define us, that one act of faithfulness will not really matter. Yet the soul does not experience time in isolated fragments, it experiences momentum. Each choice, however minor, inclines the heart slightly in one direction. Over time, inclination hardens into orientation and orientation becomes destiny. What makes small choices so powerful is that they shape desire before they shape belief. Long before a person consciously rejects truth, they often grow accustomed to ignoring it. Long before they actively choose good, they often practice paying attention to it. Desire follows practice. The soul learns what to love by what it repeatedly chooses, even when those choices seem morally neutral. Eternity is not decided in a single moment of clarity. It is rehearsed daily in habits of attention and neglect. There is also a moral subtlety to small choices that large ones lack. When a decision is obviously right or wrong, the conscience is alert, but when the stakes appear low, conscience relaxes. This is where formation truly happens. The person you are becoming is revealed not by how you act under pressure, but by how you act when you feel free from consequence. Small choices expose what governs you when fear and praise are absent. Many people assume they will one day make a decisive choice for God, as though such a moment will arrive fully formed and independent of prior life. But decisive moments are rarely isolated. They are the natural result of countless prior decisions that have prepared the soul either to recognize truth or to resist it. When the moment comes, the choice often feels obvious, not because it is easy, but because the direction has already been set. The danger of small choices is not that they are insignificant, but that they are cumulative. No single moment of distraction ruins a soul. No single act of faithfulness completes it. But repeated distraction trains the soul to live elsewhere, just as repeated faithfulness trains it to return. Over time, what once felt like effort becomes instinct. This is why people are often surprised by who they have become. They did not choose it all at once. They drifted there by increments. Every small choice is a form of alignment. It aligns the will with something, even if that something is merely comfort, avoidance, or control. The soul cannot remain neutral. To choose distraction over presence, even briefly, is still a choice toward something. To choose silence over attention is still a movement away from something. The moral life is not lived on a stage, but in the margins, in the quiet preferences that rarely make it into conscious reflection. Time magnifies the significance of these movements. What seems negligible today becomes decisive over years. The soul slowly becomes less responsive to what it repeatedly ignores and more responsive to what it repeatedly attends to. This is not punishment, it is formation. The heart grows familiar with certain patterns and strange to others. Eventually, what once felt unnatural begins to feel like home, whether that home is light or darkness. Small choices also shape perception. They influence not only what we do, but what we notice. A soul oriented toward God becomes sensitive to moments of grace that others pass by. A soul oriented away becomes increasingly deaf to invitations that once stirred it. This deafness is rarely sudden, it is trained. Each ignored prompting, each postponed obedience, slightly lowers the volume of the inner voice. Not because God withdraws, but because attention has been placed elsewhere. There is a particular tragedy in realizing too late that one's life has been shaped by defaults rather than decisions. Many people do not consciously reject God. They simply never choose Him in the small moments where choice feels unnecessary. They live as though neutrality were possible, as though abstaining from decision were not itself a decision. But the absence of deliberate direction does not produce stillness. It produces drift, and drift always has a direction. Conversely, small faithful choices have a quiet power that often goes unnoticed by the person making them. A few minutes of attention here, a resisted impulse there, a decision to respond rather than react, to listen rather than escape. These acts rarely feel heroic. They often feel boring, inconvenient, or even pointless. Yet they accumulate into a life that is oriented toward truth, capable of recognizing it when it appears in larger form. The soul is shaped by what it practices. Practice does not require intensity, it requires repetition. Eternity is not something the soul suddenly confronts at the end of life. It is something the soul gradually becomes compatible with or resistant to. Heaven and distance from God are not merely destinations. They are states of being cultivated over time through the things we repeatedly choose to love. Small choices also reveal what we believe about God, even more than our theology does. If we consistently choose distraction over presence, we reveal a belief that God can wait. If we consistently choose comfort over obedience, we reveal a belief that God's requests are negotiable. These beliefs may never be spoken aloud, but they are enacted daily. Over time, enacted beliefs become lived realities. There is an honesty in recognizing that no choice is spiritually neutral. The question is never whether a choice matters, but what it is shaping. When you choose how to spend your time, you are also choosing what kind of person you are becoming. When you choose where your attention rests, you are choosing what kind of world you will inhabit inwardly. Eternity begins to take shape not in the future, but in the present. Through these unnoticed movements of the will, small choices train the soul in direction long before they deliver visible results. This is why sudden change is so rare and gradual change so common. The soul prefers what is familiar. Familiarity is built through repetition, not resolution. Over time, the soul grows more at ease with certain truths and more resistant to others, depending on what it has been fed. To understand this is to recognize the seriousness of the ordinary. Nothing is wasted. No moment is spiritually inert. Each choice adds weight to one side of the scale, even when the scale itself is unseen. Eternity is not waiting at the end to surprise us. It is being quietly rehearsed in the present through the countless small decisions that feel too insignificant to matter, yet together determine the direction in which the soul is learning how to move, how to desire, how to respond, how to exist. When all distractions are finally removed, what remains, then, is not argument but invitation, not pressure, not spectacle, not urgency born of fear, but a simple turning of attention. Nothing dramatic is being demanded. Nothing is being forced. Only a small space is being opened in which you may choose to become still long enough to notice what has been quietly calling you all along. You do not need to fix your life before you enter that space. You do not need the right words, the right mood, or the right certainty. You need only honesty and a willingness to pause. 30 minutes is not a bargain struck with God, nor a test you must pass. It is a doorway, a way of saying, if only for a short while, that you are willing to stop managing everything and allow yourself to be addressed rather than entertained, shaped rather than distracted. In that time, nothing may feel spectacular, yet something may begin to reorder itself beneath the surface. Attention given sincerely has a way of softening what has been hardened, clarifying what has been blurred, and steadying what has been restless. You are not brought here to be impressed or persuaded, but to be invited into presence. The value of what follows will not be measured by emotion or immediate clarity, but by faithfulness to that small turning. What you do with these next moments matters more than what you think about them. The choice does not announce itself loudly, but it is real all the same, waiting quietly, patiently, asking only whether you will now give God what so many intentions have promised, but so little time has ever fulfilled.